we are beginning with this first parallel session. I think the other people who are not here don't know what they are losing, because this session will be extraordinary, an extraordinary session, okay? I greet you, each of you and all of you, for being here. And I should begin thanking the hosts of this event. I think this 14th edition of the annual conference of ICIC is being already a success, and I'm sure it will conclude as a landmark on this kind of events of the ICIC. This parallel session 4 deals with the theme information disorder cases and counter campaigns, risks and opportunities in AI generation. And the primary objective of the program is to explore opportunities for international co-regulation and mitigation strategies, as well as to discuss how big data and artificial intelligence can be utilized to counter information disorder. It's something impossible. Anyway, I am afraid that this general goal goes far beyond the real capabilities of intervention by ICIC and each of its members. Anyway, if one goes back to the last year conference, we would remember that central theme was then access to information as a milestone of digital age to guarantee human rights, the inclusion of groups in situations of vulnerability, and the strengthening of democratic institutions in the 21st century. A simple survey of many and many seminars, conferences, workshops relating to the access to information will show that the concept of digital age was in the agenda then. Today, less than a year after, if you look around, every seminar, every conference, every workshop, even if digital age theme continues there, every seminar, the focus now turned decisively to the artificial intelligence. Almost everything comes within the context of artificial intelligence. All around the world, things appear to be advancing at an extraordinary speed. However, is that we could reiterate the famous sentence in the Leopard of Lampedusa, for everything to remain the same, everything must change? Or now are things really changing? And in this case, will we see the widening or the narrowing of the gap between the haves and the haves not? I think that the 4 panelists that will speak to us have been very well chosen. In fact, 2 of them, Mr. Christopher Rada and Mr. Yves Gonzalez, come from the industry. Mr. Christopher Rada, TikTok head of public policy in the Philippines, who has been working in digital literacy, including the theme of online safety. Mr. Yves Gonzalez from Google is currently part of the Southeast Asia Government Affairs and Public Policy team of Google. One comes from a public institution, my dear friend Luciana Carpinacci, National Director of Evaluation of Transparency Policies of the Agency of Access to Public Information, Argentina. The last but not least, or I will say last but not least, Ms. Maria Fashley, Executive Dean, Faculty of Science and Health, UNESCO, and Chair in Analytics and Data Science, University of Essex. And really, now I will say last but not least, we have had a last-minute acquisition. Our rapporteur, Cibeles, Miss Cibeles, comes from Brazil. If you see the program, there was a first rapporteur, then a second rapporteur, but at the last minute, we made this contract with Brazil, and here we have the rapporteur. Okay. Now, I have here a guide to the questions that I should put to the panelists. I will put now the questions to all of you, so you have the time to think of. And the first is to Luciana Carpinacci. Okay. Is there, what are the cases of information disorder that have occurred within your institution jurisdiction, and what is the policy response for you? For you both. From the private sector perspective, particularly in the social media sector, what are your organization's preventive measures and mitigating strategies to counter information disorder? You can begin thinking of it, okay? And finally, Dr. Fashley. Doctor, they said you were doctor. Dr. Fashley.
Not a medical one.
You're not a medical one, but they present you as doctor, and I said, doctor. Well, from an expert perspective, how can big data and AI address and affect the policy bottlenecks in combating information disorder? This is, I think, very important for us to hear from you on that perspective. If we have time, after the intervention of the speakers, I will concede 2 or 3 interventions from the audience to put questions, if we have time. It's like a reward for you being here, okay? Now, let's begin with Luciana Carpinacci. Mi querida amiga, tienes la palabra y voy a escucharte con mucho gusto.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Alberto. Aprovechando que tenemos la traducción simultánea, voy a hacer uso del servicio para poder expresarme más claramente en español, mi lengua de origen. Tenemos una presentación. Bien. El caso que nos invitaron a presentar nos permite, como Agencia de Acceso a la Información Pública de Argentina, presentar las políticas que estamos desarrollando para garantizar el acceso a la información. Somos una institución, ¿sí avanzamos una? La Agencia de Acceso a la Información Pública de Argentina es una institución joven, es una institución creada en el año 2017, cuando se sanciona, es una de las últimas leyes de acceso a la información de la región, pero el derecho de acceso estaba garantizado por decreto desde el año 2003, es decir, que existía el ejercicio de garantizar el acceso, si bien la garantía de ese derecho por ley recién surgió desde hace 5 años. Is it okay, the translation? It's not, okay. Okay, so I can turn to English, no problem. I was a little bit afraid of my, not very confident about my English because it's a little bit rusty. I was telling you that our law is from 2017. Although we had a decree from 2003 that include the practice of the organizations to guarantee the right, but only 5 years ago we have the law. And if we go one forward, please. We can see that in our case, our institution has to guarantee both the right of privacy and the right of access. I think that those rights, we think as an institution that those rights are frequently in tension. There is a tension between those rights, but we have the responsibility to process those rights altogether. We are assuming the challenge of processing those rights in particular cases altogether, because we think it's the only way in which we have a responsibility as government officials to analyze case by case resolutions. And apart from that, our head, the commissioner of the agency, has last year she acquired the mandate for 5 years, and she challenged us to elaborate a strategic plan for the 5 years of mandate. So in this strategic plan, there was a new area of transparency that was incorporated to the agency. So now we have privacy, access, and transparency, which is daily my challenge at work. And from that perspective is that we're going to share the experience from an experience of collaborating with the personal data protection area and the area of transparency to elaborate a joint program to work transparency in artificial intelligence projects in the public sector. That is the challenge we are facing, and that's I will try to be brief in telling you what are our guidelines with the project. This strategic plan has got 5 objectives, 5 strategic objectives, in which we work with the exercise of the rights, with developing regulatory capacities. We have developed a new privacy law last year that is now going to the legislative to be treated. Promoting transparency and citizen participation, and developing institutional capacities in our agency to implement the laws. So with those guidelines we work. One of 10 policy results expected for this year is this artificial intelligence program. So if we go one more, we have worked, one less, okay. We have worked with the principles developed so far by OECD, by Asilomar Conference, and UNESCO guidelines, UNESCO recommendations, in which we see that the values and the principles of security and the principles of transparency and explainability or explicability are very important in the development of artificial intelligence systems or projects, especially in the public sector. In this case, what we see is that although artificial intelligence is developing, of course, a lot faster and more, I would say, violently in the private sector. The public sector has a very strong responsibility to be guided by these principles, because if not, how will we be in position to enforce the laws that we are developing? So that is why we search in the region, and we thought that it was a value, aggregated value to share with you in relation to our region. How is the region working so far with bills that intend to regulate the use of artificial intelligence, not only by the public sector, but by the private sector? So far, we have 5 countries that have developed their bills, and there is a bill being proposed in Mexico, all of them from last year to this year, 22-23, also in Colombia. We have recently seen the preparation of a bill in Brazil, also in Chile, and Peru has lately passed a law to establish the institutional arrangements by which they will regulate artificial intelligence projects. In Argentina, we have a project, but mainly the experience we have is a recent guidelines of how to follow the cycle of development of artificial intelligence projects in the public sector. So as a country, we have not yet been in the position to elaborate a bill regarding all of artificial intelligence projects. I think that's because our data privacy regulation has 20 years now, and we thought first we needed to upgrade the regulations on data privacy to then be in position to regulate artificial intelligence. And we have enforced the regulations with the Convention 108 Plus from the European Union. And the experience that we're going to share with you now regards artificial intelligence in the public sector. So we have been working in a regional alliance for algorithmic transparency that is led by the University of Adolfo Ibáñez in Chile with the Council on Transparency of Chile. They have developed an investigation, a thorough investigation. I can see Bernardo Navarrete there, so maybe he can add if I forget something. They have made a thorough investigation of algorithms being used in the public sector and developed guidelines to transparent those algorithms. So they have invited us to form this alliance, in which we are going to be working with Chile and Uruguay from Argentina to develop this same investigation and same transparency guidelines for the public sector. So what does the program consist of? The program we are developing consists of a goal of analysis, regulation, and capacity building on transparency and personal data protection for the use of IA in public sector organizations. In this program, we think that as a young institution, we need to widen our knowledge and our experience as generating a multidisciplinary advisory council on this matter, because we know that we don't have the knowledge inside. Who has the knowledge inside in public sector about artificial intelligence? I think this is a very difficult matter, and we need to widen our capacities. So that is the first goal. Then we will be working with the Alliance in the monitoring of the advances and the mapping of actors and generating knowledge about the the developments of these projects. And thirdly, we will work with capacity building in the organizations to be able to promote transparency and data protections in these projects. So these are the 3 pillars of the program. And lastly, I'm just finishing, the recommendations we are developing have to do with the cycle of IA projects. The Secretary of Innovation in our country has passed guidelines on transparency and the recommendations of transparency and personal data protection for a reliable artificial intelligence projects. So the work that we have done so far has to do with identifying in each sequence, in each stage of the process, what would be the transparency and data protection needs for a project to be reliable. We have used the OECD questions and the OECD guidelines to establish a first proposal, and we can share. It's very interesting for us to share it with you in this convention, because I think we need to cooperate a lot so far in thinking what would be the values that citizens would most recognize from governments to guarantee the transparency needs of IA projects. Because citizens are used to interact with artificial intelligence and sometimes not knowing that they are interacting with it. So maybe that's the first right, no? To know, to be informed that you are interacting with this kind of systems on the first place. That is something that it's not guaranteed today. So the ideas that we are sharing with you today have to do with what would be the transparency needs in the design of the system, what would be those in the verification and validation process of the system, what would be in the implementation process, and what would be in the operation and maintenance of the project. This is a cycle, a continuous cycle that defies us to think all the time how to be more transparent and protect that personal information of the citizens. So maybe 1 or 2 more things. We think that citizens deserve to know what are the main objectives of an IA system, which is the main objective. Why is it that the government decides to use this kind of technology in the development and not another kind of technology? What are the assessment of risks that was made, and what are the main responses to these risks? And all this you can guarantee if you use a transparency by design methodology, because you are thinking this from the first moment of the design of the system, not when the system is already running, because then you have more problems to see inside the black box, as my colleague from Uruguay was sharing me. And so you have also to present what we call a publication of the Ethical Commitment Act. What are the values that guide the system? And this has to be published and known by citizens. So in this case, we know that these principles are being followed. During the implementation, you have to make several audits to the system and inform the systems of the results and test with users. And lastly, publish periodic reports on what are the results of the monitoring of the system. So citizens can be informed about how the developments of these systems are running. So I'm sorry if I extended too much, and thank you very much for your listening.
Muchas gracias. Ha sido muy bueno oírte, aunque sin traducción simultánea. Thank you very much. Your intervention was very useful, even if you had to speak in English and you intend to speak in Spanish. Okay. It's interesting. There is now also in this field a big competition between or among several blocs. And the European Union intends to be at the forefront in this competition. Last week, the European Parliament approved a proposal to act on the use of artificial intelligence. If this proposal goes ahead, it will be the first act of a general impact on these matters. And it is interesting because even there is a competition to be the host for the first global conference on these matters. The United Kingdom, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, went to the United States and said, we want to be the siège of the first global conference on these matters. And now, for Mr. Rada, it's up to you to decide who speaks first. It's up to you to speak first, speak second. The questions I had put to you both. So it's up to you to begin and discussing what you want. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Rada. I represent ByteDance. For those of you might be more familiar with our leading product, TikTok. I represent ByteDance in the Philippines and Malaysia. And today we've been asked to talk about the information disorder. Whenever we're asked to talk about this, we always couch it. First of all, if you're not familiar with TikTok, we are a short-form mobile video platform, largely known for entertainment. But also now we see a lot of other things, very educational content also coming out on the platform. Now, going back to TikTok, the backbone of our platform has always been safety. And for that reason, we have what we call community guidelines that we enforce rather strictly. And among the prohibited things in our community guidelines are things such as hate speech, harassment and bullying, and mis and disinformation. Now, and through this lens, this is where I see the new developments in AI being bucketed under. And to say that this is a problem of all platforms. We all have this challenge that we're constantly facing, and we must evolve to meet these challenges head on. Just to say also that even ahead of the regulations that were being spoke about earlier, ByteDance has already, and TikTok in particular, has revised these community guidelines to include what we call synthetic media, which would disallow, say, impersonations of private individuals using their likeness to mislead people. So, like I said, this is where I see this trend going, that this is really part of a bigger problem that we have been facing for the longest time. And if you allow me just to share what our approach has been towards meeting this, we have had 3 pillars, at least in this part of the world, that we have seen to be very successful. The first one is what we talked about in general, enhancing moderation, which is really the more visible part of what is thrown to platforms, wherein we are tasked to properly enforce the community guidelines that I just mentioned. Things like mis and disinformation, harassment and bullying are regularly policed by a trust and safety team that we had. Just to share also that in our website, you might want to see that we have a transparency report that shows that about 95% of all of these violative pieces of content are actually removed from the platform before anyone even sees it. right? So we are constantly trying to upskill and to evolve. Like I said, now we have included portions of synthetic media as violations of these community guidelines to ensure that our users on the platform continually have a safe and fun experience. However, when I say that, we also realize that based on our experience, if we really want to get to a true solution to the information disorder, it is not enough to focus on that one bucket. We see it as a multi-sectoral problem that requires a multi-sectoral solution. So that is one. We have, as platforms, definitely have a responsibility to properly moderate content on our platform. However, we see that that is not enough. We see an equally important second leg wherein we have to encourage credible sources of information to onboard the platforms, right? I just saw a survey that came out last week that say more and more Filipinos now are getting their news sources from platforms such as TikTok. So the impetus of really encouraging, say, the big news organizations, institutions, educational institutions, to put up content on online platforms, knowing fully well that that's where this new generation is looking for information, becomes more and more important. And ByteDance as a company is committed to working with these institutions to promote credible sources of information. And of course, lastly, the third leg is digital literacy and education. I just saw Malu Mangahas, one of the most respected journalists here in the Philippines, but I think she stepped out. She has been part of our digital literacy campaigns to encourage the broader public, both in her capacity as a journalist and through her news organization, GMA News, the largest news organization in the Philippines, to help promote digital literacy in the Philippines. I see Mr. Christian Ablan, who has served in government in various capacities, and we are very happy to work with officials such as Mr. Ablan to further improve the education and digital literacy in the Philippines. So that is just one of many ways by which we are trying to spur digital literacy. And just to mention, in Malaysia, which I also handle, about a month ago, we signed for the first time in Malaysia a digital safety pledge with the Minister of Communications and Digital, showing our full commitment to make sure that our platform is kept safe, and the ills that we mentioned of, we will proactively work with government and see them as a partner so that we are working hand in hand with shared goals to ensure that we are truly trying to rid ourselves of the information disorder, which includes the looming threat of misinformation on the AI systems. So thank you very much. And again, my thanks to the ICIC for giving us the opportunity to speak before an esteemed panel of guests this afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Yves Gonzalez. I'm part of the Southeast Asia Government Affairs and Public Policy team of Google. Before anything else, I'd like to greet everyone a happy Father's Day, especially to Christopher Rada, who became a father yesterday for the first time. So at Google, our mission has always been to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So from our mission alone, our obligation, our responsibility for information quality and safety is primordial. So the current issues that we're facing right now on AI, we see it as part of our multi-year obligation and the processes that we've been doing for the past several years on content responsibility. So at Google, how we see AI, number one, of course, and mentioned earlier, is the opportunity. The economic opportunities that AI gives to humanity is, nobody can measure it right now, but it's in the trillions of dollars. But of course, coming from the opportunity, there comes the responsibility. And this is where Google plays a big role on the responsibility pillar. And so as AI systems develop, it is important that we develop it responsibly. While we are bold in our innovation, we are responsible in our approach. And so how do we do this responsibility piece? So as mentioned by Mr. Rada, number one, of course, is the policies. It is important that the company has policies against irresponsible use of AI, whether it's for sexual materials, hate speech, misinformation, and disinformation. These are explicitly prohibited by our policies and the terms of use. Second, of course, is the technology. So Google invests in the technology to enable us to better use AI in a responsible manner. And how do we go about this? So for example, as we get into generative AI, Google has announced that we will be putting watermarks on visual generative AI, such that these watermarks clearly show that this visual is generative AI, as well as including it in the metadata. Other parts of technology, for example, is Google contributes significant corpus in studies and research to help the scientific community, the academic community, develop systems on how to detect synthetic audio or visual deepfakes. So Google has been contributing to that. And then finally is the systems. So of course, in AI development, it's important for us to have systems in place to keep on continually improving how it works. So we have what we call reinforcement learning from human feedback, in which we continually improve our AI systems based on the human feedback that we get both from you guys as users, as well as our trusted feedback people who help Google in developing these systems. So with that, we look forward to really having a collaborative effort in how we all work together to resolve and fix a lot of the issues that we are seeing on the AI front. This is something that we need to do together with society, with NGOs, with governments, and we are look forward to continuing to engage with governments on this. Thank you.
These problems with these big companies and big systems lead us to a question that was raised in the morning. In the morning, someone raised the question, perhaps the right to know, the right to get information that now relies only on public entities, that is, say, government entities or other entities that are funded by governments and so on. Perhaps we should also have the right to the access to information of private enterprise, private companies, and to know how they produce those algorithms, those data upon which they decide to suspend, to eliminate, or to permit something. One thing that gives us the idea that it's important to know something. When we saw that one or two companies decide that the president of the most important country in the world should not have the right to be in certain platform, we have to know, we must know why the governments rely on these platforms, on these private platforms. And it is for these platforms to decide upon a political opinion, even if this political opinion is very controversial, as it was and as it is. And now, for instance, the same company reintroduced the possibility of that same person to be there again. And now, Maria, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Fazli. I'm both excited and intimidated to be here today. Excited because I'm meeting new people that are working in areas that I have a particular interest in, but also intimidated because I'm among people that can actually influence change. You are government officials that can implement change, whereas I can't, because I'm a mere academic. So the topic of today's panel is information disorder cases, and I was asked to talk about AI. And part of the thrill of being here today is because suddenly in the last few years, when I say what I do, because my area of expertise is in AI, people are taking an interest, whereas 7 years ago or about 5 years ago, I would say I do AI and people would just turn around and walk as fast as they could out of the room. So it's quite amazing to see the difference and how fast things are developing. But back to the main topic, and I just wanted to start by saying that misinformation and disinformation are not new phenomena. They have been around for a very long time. And apparently the notion that Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, was just a cunning seductress was Roman propaganda. So it goes back a long, long way. And artificial intelligence technologies that we've been talking about briefly have the potential to truly transform the world around us. They have the potential to make a real difference on individuals' lives, but also bring about really positive impacts for communities as well as societies at the national as well as global level. But it's how we use them. And there's even misinformation about AI, and I've been talking to some of you, and some of you have expressed your fears about what AI can do and whether it's going to take over the world or it's going to take over our jobs or they're going to, these systems are going to annihilate us. So there is a little bit of misinformation, not because it's anyone's particularly fault, but because there's so much out there that you don't know how to discern what's true and what's not. And fighting misinformation and disinformation is actually a global challenge. It's not country specific. It's the same across the world. And the problem is that everyone, including all of you in this room, you are not just consumers of information, but you are actually producing information, which is a new phenomenon in itself, whereas in the past we were consumers of information that was given to us via media. Now we are the ones that can actually produce information when we are uploading images and we are posting our views online. And for a start, if you want to understand disinformation and misinformation in the context of AI, you need to understand how AI can be used to unfortunately facilitate misinformation and disinformation. So AI technologies like natural language processing can actually now create new content. You may have heard about ChatGPT. You can go online, you can put in a question and the system comes up with all sorts of interesting facts or not so much facts. There's user profiling that we can do every time you post something online, every time you perform an action and the system collects data about you. We can use this data to understand you better as an individual, and we can create powerful user profiles that can be used to direct information at you or to try and influence you, and we have seen this in examples all around the world. AI can also be used for distribution of information or misinformation and disinformation, as well as amplification. So you say one thing, AI can be used to amplify the distributed information. Some of my colleagues mentioned techniques like watermarks. This is to try and present deep fakes. This is to try and prevent the president of the Philippines coming up with a speech that actually doesn't belong to the president, because we have seen, again, these things happening. And AI can be used in this way to marginalize individuals, identify communities and target them. So there are real risks. It can be used to reinforce biases and stereotypes, and we need collectively to try and guard against these risks. And also it can be used to propagate ideologies, good or not so good. But equally, we have tools at our disposal through AI that can really help us to try and tackle this misinformation and disinformation that exists all around us today. So we can have systems that automatically or semi-automatically detect the inappropriate content and remove this content. And we've heard earlier again about this today. Such systems can also be used for fact-checking, because you can cross-reference information across multiple media and multiple sources to make sure that you can talk about the veracity of information. Is it true what it is that you are reporting? We can use these technologies to detect deep fakes, but also these technologies can be used to detect persistent cases of websites or propagation of misinformation and disinformation, and try and do something perhaps at the policy government level or at the company level when this is identified. So there's a lot that AI can do to support and prevent disinformation and misinformation from happening. Now, as I said, I come from the academic community. I can only try and help as much as I can. And we have, I feel, as an academic, we have a role to play ourselves, but working with all of you, with multiple stakeholders in this. On the one hand, we are the ones that are developing these methods. These methods that you are all using, they come out of research labs in universities, as well as research and development units in big companies and smaller companies. So we have to be the responsible ones, making sure that what we produce, what comes out, is actually helping in keeping transparency, fairness, accountability in the system, rather than letting out in the wild systems that actually are not supporting human rights, but are hurting human rights. I feel we have to work with government organizations. If you have not worked with academics before in your countries, I would encourage you to seek them out. We are humans after all, and we like seeing our work finding its way to government and to policy. Because it's in all our gift to ensure that the risks that AI can pose in the future are well understood and managed, and in particular we put in place frameworks, and we need legal frameworks, we need all sorts of different frameworks to make sure that we manage and regulate AI. And the third thing I feel very passionate about, and one of my speakers has already touched on this, as well as previous panelists in the previous panel that we held, is education, education, education. And education is not just about educating students, getting the graduates out so that we can have the right skills. It's educating businesses, it's educating government officials, but very importantly, also educating our citizens in understanding what AI can do for them and what AI cannot do for them. And in this regard, it's very important that we dispel these myths about AI, but keeping this very fine balance between freedom of expression versus fighting misinformation and disinformation is quite an interesting challenge going forward. And the chair has asked me how it is that AI can help with policy. Well, we have very powerful techniques at our disposal. And when you are, as policymakers, you are trying to think of the kind of policies that you can put in place to incentivize behaviors in the citizens and make sure that policies work. We now have very powerful techniques that can help you run what-if scenarios. So if you want to improve the public transport system in Manila, we can run scenarios and tell you what might work and what might not work. But also these techniques and big data, the availability of data in general, can help policymakers make informed decisions on policy, evidence-based policy. So there's quite a lot that we can do. But I want to finish by saying that actually we are just starting to scratch on the surface of what AI will bring around. We have started thinking about some issues, but not everything. There's still quite a lot to come in terms of what the technology will bring. And I want to leave you with the question of how autonomous are you as a human if you have a processor which is embedded in your brain and it enhances your cognitive skills, because that's maybe around the corner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So it's very interesting. They are signaling that we are out of time, but I had a promise. I had promised. I give you 2 possibilities of intervention, 30 seconds, if any one of you want to intervene. Okay, please.
I'm addressing this question. Thanks to the panelists. I think this has been fantastic. To the 2 people from the digital platforms on transparency of your policies. Yeah. Just to say that, how transparent are your policies? And are they accessible to anyone who wants to have access to them? Because, you know, I'm asking this question because, as you know, there is an apprehension. There are 90 elections that are going to be held between now and the end of next year. With disinformation, misinformation, and fake news, if that is not properly addressed, it can be a real threat to our democracy.
Another one, if there is. Okay, please.
So thank you, very interesting. I was just thinking that a lot of this, even in India, we are looking at this and the government keeps reassuring us of informed consent. But to my mind, that doesn't work even if you have informed consent, because either I install the app or I don't use it at all. So I think it's more sort of either you use it or you just don't have the right to use it and there's no grading. Is that something that, you know, going forward, we're going to see more and more of that happening? So how do you respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, to finalize, I have put some provocative sentences, the ideas, and you have these questions. All of you, each of you have now 2 minutes to say what you want. We will begin with same order, and in the end, I will not summarize because you are just reading the same that I have heard, and the summarize will be done by our rapporteur. Okay, please, Luciana.
Just one idea. I think that responsibility from governments and enterprises is not at the same level. Governments have to assure common good, public good, and enterprises are guided by welfare or benefits, and that is not wrong, but values are different. So that's why we say capacity building, enforcement, and human values is what is more on the side of governments, but it's just a humble thought.
Thank you.
Perhaps on the issue of transparency, I'd say 3 things about that. First of all, the community guidelines that TikTok has, we've always been transparent with this. They are published on our website, available, accessible for everyone to see. Second, in terms of the transparency report that I mentioned, these are the results that happen after moderation. They are likewise available for everyone to see. Like I said, 95% of violative content is revealed on our transparency report to be taken down before anyone even sees it on the platform. And then lastly, to further improve that, we are now in the process of opening up TikTok transparency centers across the world. We have already opened up one in Los Angeles. Here in this part of the world, we will open one up in Singapore, and we would be very happy to invite members of the ICIC to visit that center once it's open. What it reveals is now questions about, say, the algorithm. How does algorithm on TikTok work? You will be put in a simulation wherein you will be put in the shoes of a moderator and figure out how do you moderate content so you truly understand the process, the thinking behind the platform. So that is really it. And then to the last point, perhaps my view is always collaboration is key, at least in this part of the world. We have seen a great amount of success talking about enhancing moderation, talking about building credible sources of information, and lastly, enhancing digital literacy and education. And that cannot be done by one sector alone. It has to be an absolute collaboration between the private, the government, and us as individuals. So I hope that addresses the questions that you posed.
Yeah. So on the Google side, in addition to having policies that are publicly available, and as well as transparency reports which you update on a quarterly basis, on the election side, we do have websites that allow you to, we have a transparency website that allows you to see the political advertisements that Google has run, so that people can have visibility on these. But most importantly, since 2017, Google has published its AI responsibility principles, and we do keep it updated on a year-to-year basis based on the things that we've learned, the changes that have been brought about by recent developments. And so we are quite open and transparent with how we develop our principles, our ways of working. And so all of these are publicly accessible.
Just some very quick points. The first one is AI should be used for social good and societal benefit. Number two, government, states carry a very special responsibility in the use of AI and protecting citizens and making sure that AI is used for societal benefit. And point number three, in this regard, UNESCO has published guidelines on AI and ensuring fairness, transparency, accountability, and the preservation of human rights. So if you have not looked at them, I would encourage you to look at them. They are very helpful in formulating policy.
Thank you. Thank you, you all, with your very positive interventions. Thank you to the rapporteur. We'll see then the report. Thank you to you all. Finally, I am from Portugal. Our commission has this year 30 years of existence. Okay, it was a pleasure. Thank you all. And please, the next panel will be better than this one. Okay.